There is no secret marriage, and no daughter. On the TV, my husband was facing countless flashing lights, speaking each word clearly and coldly. I froze in place, my 3-year-old daughter Lily looking up at me in confusion. "Mom, what is Dad saying? Does Dad not like me anymore?" At that moment, my phone vibrated softly. I looked down. The screen showed an unread message sent 6 days ago, a glaring photo of a male vasectomy certificate, accompanied by a brief sentence: "As long as you're willing, Lily will be my only child from now on." On the TV screen, Francis's handsome but cold face filled the frame. The navy tie he wore today was the one I picked out, with a subtle, hidden pattern, a gift for our 4th wedding anniversary. At that time, I thought he at least liked it. At this moment, he pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose, his thin lips parting slightly, and spoke clearly to the camera: "There is no secret marriage, nor any daughter." My hand holding the remote control turned white at the knuckles. He paused, then added a sentence, as if speaking to the whole world, yet also as if deliberately saying it to me through the screen: "As everyone knows, I have been single all these years." His tone was calm and steady, yet it was harsher than any rebuke. Finally, his gaze grew stern, as if warning some unseen enemy. "I advise those with ill intentions not to indulge in wild fantasies and bring disgrace upon themselves." After speaking, he stood up, and the bodyguards and assistants behind him immediately surrounded him, blocking off the reporters and escorting him into the car. I blankly pressed the power button. The light in the living room suddenly dimmed as the screen went dark, with only the floor lamp in the corner still emitting a faint yellow glow, making the room feel especially lonely. In this dead silence, a faint sob came from the stairway, like the whimper of a kitten, piercing straight into my ears. I suddenly turned around and saw Lily, my 3-year-old daughter, standing barefoot at the stair landing in her bare pajamas, her little face covered in tears, staring blankly at me, her shoulders trembling. "Lily?" I quickly got up and rushed over to hold her in my arms. "Why aren't you asleep? Did you sneak down?" The little one usually would be fast asleep by this time. Lily's damp little face was buried against my chest, her small mouth pouting as she asked with a thick nasal tone, "Mom, why does Dad say he doesn't have a daughter?" Her tiny hand clutched tightly at the front of my nightgown. "He doesn't have a daughter, then what is Lily?" My heart felt as if it had been squeezed hard, the pain making it almost hard to breathe. Francis is a man of few words. Although he does care for Lily, his affection feels more like a routine obligation. He spends very little time at home, and when he is home, he always wears a stern expression. Lily is close to him but also a little afraid. Her temperament is much more sensitive than other children. That year, when the wisteria in the old house was in full bloom, Grandpa made the final decision about Francis and me. I was really foolish back then, thinking that as long as I worked hard enough, even a stone could be warmed. But after 4 years, this stone seems to have grown colder and colder. The night before his business trip, he still used that same style of tie, just a different color, the one he's wearing now, which I picked out. He had many ties, and he tied my wrists with them, ignoring my tears and resistance, tormenting me for most of the night. He said it was a kind of intimacy, but all I felt was humiliation. Later, I couldn't help but bite his neck, thinking back now, that bite mark probably hasn't faded yet. That's just how he is, outwardly. Francis is self-disciplined and restrained, but at home, once the door is closed, he becomes someone insatiably demanding. I touched my daughter's soft hair, gently wiping away the tear stains on her face bit by bit, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lily, do you want to leave here with Mom?" Lily lifted her little face from my arms, her big eyes still filled with tears, and asked confusedly, "Where are we going? Will we still go home later?" I lowered my eyes and forced a smile that was even more pitiful than crying. "We won't go back." I looked at Lily, and word by word, told her very seriously, "This is not our home. This is Francis's home. We've stayed here for a long time and have already disturbed him a lot. So now, we should go back to our own home." Lily nodded, half understanding, and said in a childish voice, "Lily listens to Mommy. Wherever Mommy goes, Lily goes. Good girl." I held her and went back to the room, gently laid her on the bed, and tucked in the blanket. Lily quickly fell asleep, her little face still marked with tears that hadn't dried yet. My gaze fell on the photo frame on her bedside table. It was the only photo of the three of us, taken when Lily had just turned 1. In the photo, Francis sat upright with his usual distant expression. I was holding Lily, smiling somewhat shyly, my body unconsciously leaning slightly toward Francis. But he sat straight, and between us, there was always that little gap. I picked up the photo frame and quietly left Lily's room. Back in the master bedroom, I found a pair of scissors. Following the tiny gap between his and my bodies in the photo, I snipped it in two with a crisp sound. It turned out that gap had long foretold how easily I could separate us today. I kept the half that belonged to Lily and me, and casually tossed his half into the bottom drawer of the bedside table. At that moment, the phone screen lit up briefly. It was a message received 6 days ago, which I had deliberately ignored all along. Opening it, there was an electronic receipt for a male vasectomy, accompanied by a brief sentence: "As long as you are willing, Lily will be my only child from now on." Sender, Stanley. My tears fell without warning, landing on the cold phone screen and spreading a blurry patch of water stains. The obsession weighing on my heart these past few years seemed, at this moment, to have finally found an outlet for release, then shattered into dust. Francis returned from a week-long business trip. When he stepped through the door, the night was as dark and impenetrable as ink. In the past, Lily and I would have kept the lights on waiting for him, even until dawn. But tonight, Lily went to bed early after washing up, and I moved into the guest room on the second floor. The breeze on the terrace was a bit chilly. I was staring blankly at my phone screen, which showed a message Stanley sent 6 days ago: "A vasectomy operation slip for a man," along with a sentence as heavy as 1,000 pounds. "Cecilia, as long as you say yes, Lily will be my only child from now on." The sound of a car engine shutting off came from downstairs, followed by familiar footsteps, steady and unhurried, carrying his usual sense of control. He first went up to the master bedroom on the 3rd floor, and after a short while, the footsteps returned, stopping outside my guest room door. "Cecilia, open the door." His voice came through the door, emotionless and unreadable. I quickly stuffed my phone under the pillow, hastily wiped the moisture from the corner of my eye, cleared my throat, and said, "I'm going to sleep. If there's anything, let's talk about it tomorrow." No sooner had I finished speaking than the door lock clicked as he used the spare key from outside to open it. Well, of course, this is Francis's house, his territory. If he wants to enter any room, who needs to give permission? He stood in the doorway against the light, his figure looking especially tall. "Why did you move to the guest room?" His tone carried a subtle hint of displeasure. Perhaps I was just being too sensitive. I sat up on the bed and looked at him as calmly as I could. The long flight had left a trace of fatigue between his brows. He instinctively pressed his forehead as he spoke, his voice a little hoarse. The lingering, laughable so-called concern in my heart was forcibly suppressed by me. I looked away and gazed out at the dark night sky. "I haven't been feeling well these past few days, afraid I might infect you." "I don't care about that, I'm moving back." He walked to the bedside, and seeing I didn't move, his brows furrowed just slightly, his fingertips lightly tapping along the seam of his suit pants. "Cecilia? I want to sleep now, you should rest early too." I tugged at the blanket. He said nothing further, but bent down and scooped me up horizontally in one embrace. "It's been a week, don't you want to?" He lowered his head to kiss me, his breath carrying his usual cedar scent, along with a trace of travel dust. I suddenly turned my head away, and his kiss landed on my temple. His movement faltered, and the expression on his face instantly turned cold, like a lake surface covered with thin ice in early winter. "Cecilia." His fingers tightened, gripping my arm painfully. "What kind of tantrum are you throwing?" In the 4 years of marriage, I have never refused him in bed. In fact, when he returned from business trips, I would usually take the initiative. Because only then could I catch a trace of emotion in his eyes that wasn't just routine. But now, my body felt frozen, and the fire in my heart had long been extinguished by his own hands. I forcefully broke free from his embrace, and the moment my feet touched the ground, I felt finally grounded. "Francis, let's separate." The words left my mouth, and I was stunned myself. We already have a child, yet all I could say was separate. Between us, besides a cold, formal agreement, we didn't even have that red marriage certificate. He was first stunned, then as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world, a mocking curve appeared at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were as cold as knives. Because of what I clarified in front of the media? Not entirely. I said, my voice somewhat drifting, maybe, if you had only clarified the marriage, I could still fool myself with 10,000 other reasons. But he denied Lily's existence. These past few days, whenever I closed my eyes, it was Lily's tear-filled, wronged, and confused big eyes that appeared. Yes. In the end, I only managed to utter this one word. He loosened his tie, walked to the window, turning his back to me. "You know, that was just a temporary measure to deal with the media. I'm very busy, I don't have time to soothe your emotions over such trivial matters." He turned around, pointed his index finger to his temple, as if to say how unreasonable my emotions were. I tried to keep my voice calm, but the hand hanging by my side clenched so hard that my nails dug into my palm. "I don't need your consolation. I'm serious." I took a deep breath. The previous agreement can be voided. I only want Lily. The scorn in Francis's eyes deepened. He took 2 steps forward and looked down at me, as if scrutinizing a challenger who overestimated themselves. "You're using Lily to threaten me, trying to force me to reveal your and her identities? I've said it before, this is impossible." His tone was resolute, leaving me no room for explanation. "At least for the next few years, absolutely impossible. Cecilia, I can tolerate many things from you, but this matter is non-negotiable." The thermostat in the room was clearly on, but I felt a chill creeping up from the soles of my feet, cold enough to make my teeth chatter. At that time, just after signing the agreement and moving into his house, my best friend once grabbed my hand, hesitating to speak. "Cecilia, someone like Francis is impossible to warm up." What did I say back then? I patted my chest, looking innocent yet stubborn. "Even if he's a stone, I will warm it up. Water droplets can even wear through stone." Looking back now, it's really laughable. A stone is just a stone, no matter how long you try to warm it, it will only end up hurting you painfully. Seeing that I remained silent, Francis probably thought I was intimidated by him. His tone softened a bit but still carried an unyielding command. "Think carefully tonight. Once you've made up your mind, move back to the master bedroom." He turned around and left. The sound of the door closing was heavier than usual, which was unlike his usual calm and emotionless demeanor. I lay back down on the bed, pulled the covers over me, and closed my eyes. Forget it, I'll wait a few more days, until Grandpa returns from his convalescence in the south. It was he who made the final decision about Francis and me back then. As long as he agrees, I should be able to take Lily and leave. My mother-in-law, who favors boys over girls, usually looks at Lily with a critical eye. Now that I want to take away a loser, I suppose they would be glad to see it happen. The next day, my mother-in-law, Francis's mother, actually deigned to come. She was dressed in an exquisite suit, her hair perfectly styled, holding a cup of ginseng tea prepared by the servant, and sat gracefully across from me. She first asked about Lily's situation in a casual, indifferent tone. Before I could say much, she took a sip of tea and slowly began to speak. The clink of the teacup against the saucer sounded crisp, as if laying the groundwork for what she was about to say. "You must have heard what Francis said in front of the media that day, right?" She put down the teacup, her fingertips gently tracing the gilded floral patterns on the rim. I nodded silently. A smile, almost bordering on pleased, appeared on my grandmother-in-law's face. To be honest, I didn't expect Francis to be so straightforward this time. Over the years, there have been plenty of rumors swirling around, but he's always been too lazy to bother, never once seriously denying them. She paused, then gave me a meaningful look. "Who would have thought this time, right? I heard that Freya had just finalized her divorce, and he immediately clarified those vague, unclear relations with you." "Freya, I've heard that name before, the daughter-in-law my mother-in-law favored the most. I just heard that she got engaged early and later got married. Frances and she occasionally ran into each other at some events, just acquaintances who nodded in passing. Only now do I realize that Frances had been thinking about her all these years. So back then, the reason he agreed to accept Grandpa's arrangement and sign that agreement with me was simply because the woman he loved had married someone else, so he settled for second best, or rather, chose someone unobtrusive as a mere decoration. My mother-in-law sighed with feigned regret, picked up a small silver spoon and stirred the ginseng tea in the cup, producing a faint clinking sound, but I never expected that he wouldn't even recognize Lily. That child is really loyal. He liked Freya since he was a teenager, all the way until Freya got married. When he promised to be with you, I thought he had let go. I sat there quietly, feeling a buzzing in my ears, as if countless bees were building nests inside. Cecilia, Grandma suddenly put on a serious and heartfelt expression, reached out, and patted the back of my hand. Her nails were neatly trimmed and smooth, carrying a slight chill. You have always been a smart child. As for you, with no name or status, you know it yourself, it probably doesn't matter. But what about Lily? You surely don't want her to live her whole life like you, in the shadows, unable to see the light, do you? After she finished speaking, she picked up her teacup again and took an elegant sip, as if the words just spoken were no more significant than a casual discussion about the weather today. After the mother-in-law left, the entire villa fell into silence. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting mottled shadows on the floor. On the flower stand, a few delicate orchids had silently dropped some petals, which withered and curled up. I took out my phone and opened the messages Stanley had sent again. As long as you are willing, Lily will be my only child from now on. Tears welled up unexpectedly, blurring the words on the screen. I sniffled and, with trembling fingers, replied to Stanley, "Come pick me up. I don't want to stay in this house anymore." The moment I sent this message, it felt as if the heavy stone that had been pressing on my chest for years was finally lifted slightly. Though the weight remained, at least a ray of light had broken through. I didn't wait for Grandpa to come back. The next day, I started packing up my and Lily's things, preparing to move out. The servants seemed to sense something, each of them was at a loss and secretly called Francis. When he arrived, the moving company's truck I had called was just pulling up, and the driver was helping me load the last suitcase onto the vehicle. Stanley's plane would land in 3 hours. He would take Lily and me away to a brand new place to start a new life. Francis got out of his black Bentley, his face so dark and gloomy it seemed to drip water. Standing in the dusk's deep blue twilight, his eyes looked at me without a trace of warmth, like two bottomless, icy pools. Lily seemed frightened by him, her small body shrank into my arms as she tightly hugged my neck. I gently kissed her forehead to comfort her and asked the nanny nearby to take her to play for a while. After Lily had walked away, Francis slowly approached me. His brows were tightly furrowed, but there was a trace of suppressed irritation in his eyes. He raised his hand to tug at his collar, as if that would help him breathe more easily. "Cecilia, have I been too lenient with you these past few years?" I forced a calm smile and nodded slightly at him. "Thank you for taking care of us all these years." I meant it sincerely. Apart from not loving me and our daughter, he truly had never neglected us materially. Think carefully, he stepped forward, almost pressing against me. "If you leave here, you and Lily will be nothing. If I stay at your house, then what are we?" I asked softly, my voice not loud, but like a tiny needle piercing the balloon of his bluff. He seemed caught off guard by my question, pausing for a few seconds before speaking somewhat flusteredly. "What else are you dissatisfied with? Apart from a title, what haven't I given you?" He spread his hands as if to display the favor he had bestowed upon me. "Yes, I have had him for a full 4 years. During these 4 years, he had no other woman. We even have a lovely daughter. In this house, I am the madam in the eyes of the servants. But once outside this gate, I am just a woman Francis keeps in the shadows, whispered about by those socialites and noble ladies. My daughter is merely a topic of their idle gossip, the illegitimate child of that Francis." I can't even openly call her by her name in public. I don't want anything anymore. I looked at him, speaking each word clearly. I just want to leave with my daughter, is that okay? Perhaps my stubbornness had completely infuriated him. His voice turned as cold and hard as icicles in the dead of winter. Now, move your and your daughter's things back inside. I will pretend nothing ever happened. He pinched the bridge of his nose, seemingly trying hard to suppress his anger. What if I say no? I looked straight into his eyes without the slightest hesitation. He stared at me intently for more than 10 seconds before squeezing out through clenched teeth, "If you take a single step out the door today, there will be no coming back." Just as he finished speaking, his phone rang at an inopportune moment, sounding especially jarring in the quiet courtyard. I saw him glance at the phone, and the deep furrow in his brow seemed to ease slightly, along with the chill that surrounded him dissipating a bit. He stepped aside to answer the call. Although he deliberately lowered his voice, I still vaguely caught a few words, and his tone was unusually gentle. "Don't be afraid. I'll be there right away." "Okay, send me the address, 20 minutes, very soon." It must be Freya. Only she could make him like this. After hanging up, Francis walked toward the car, and after a few steps, it seemed he suddenly remembered I was there. He turned around, glanced at me, then spoke in a deep voice to the servant beside him, his tone returning to its usual coldness. "Move their things back. Before I come home tonight, everything in the house must be tidied up." After saying that, his gaze fell back on my face, carrying an unmistakable command. "You will move back to the master bedroom tonight, and you are no longer allowed to stay in the guest room." I didn't argue, just quietly watched him. So, Francis probably thought I would obediently listen and fall silent like countless times before. He didn't stay any longer, got straight into the car, the engine let out a low roar, and soon disappeared into the dusk. The servants looked at each other, and the nanny tentatively spoke with a troubled smile on her face. "Madam, you should go back to your room and rest first. We'll take care of packing the things." As she spoke, they were about to unload my suitcase from the moving company's truck. I reached out to stop them. "No need, we're leaving right away." "Madam?" several servants exclaimed at the same time. I lowered my eyelids, hiding the last trace of complex emotion in my eyes, my voice calm but firm. "If Mr. Francis comes back, please tell him." I paused for a moment and looked up at the heavy and ornate door of Francis's house, which in the twilight looked like a silent giant mouth. As he said, "Lily and I will never set foot inside his house again. This is not our home. It never was." Taking Lily out of that oppressive mansion and getting into the car Stanley sent to pick us up, I felt as if even the air had become much fresher. Lily was probably tired, or maybe because children forget easily, she soon leaned against me and fell asleep in the car. Looking at her peaceful sleeping face, the ice in my heart formed by Francis and his mother seemed to slowly melt a little. The car stopped in front of a hotel that looked very upscale. Stanley's assistant, a young woman who looked very capable, helped me settle the luggage and carefully asked if Lily had any dietary restrictions, saying that Mr. Stanley had specially instructed the kitchen to prepare a children's meal. I carried Lily to the bed and tucked her in. The room was large, decorated with a subtle luxury, and outside the huge floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights stretched endlessly. But I had no mood to appreciate it. My heart was restless, filled entirely with thoughts of Stanley. The news about the vasectomy weighed on my chest like a stone. I didn't know when he had made the decision, nor what he was thinking when he made it. Lost in my chaotic thoughts, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped to my throat. When I opened the door, Stanley was standing there. His trench coat was casually draped over his arm, wearing a simple dark shirt and trousers. He had lost quite a bit of weight, but his posture remained upright. After years apart, he had shed the awkwardness of youth, his brows now carrying a mature steadiness. But the way he looked at me was the same as when we were kids, warm and tender. "Cecilia," his voice was a little hoarse, his Adam's apple moving up and down. My nose tingled, and tears almost fell. Just as I was about to call out "Brother Stanley," he stepped forward, stretched out his arm, and held me tightly in his embrace. This hug was so strong that it almost took my breath away. But I could feel his body trembling slightly, and the heart beating violently in his chest. 4 years, a full 4 years. He quickly let me go, cupped my face, and roughly wiped away the tears that had slipped down my cheeks without me noticing. "All right, no more crying," he said softly. "I'm here, everything's going to be fine." I sniffled, wanting to ask about the surgery, wanting to ask what would happen to his uncle and aunt, but the words caught in my throat. 1,000 words, but in the end, only one came out: "Why have you lost so much weight?" Stanley smiled, took my wrist, and led me into the room, casually closing the door behind us. He leaned against the door, his eyes looking at me with a complicated expression. "Jet lag, plus rushing on the road a bit." He paused, his gaze falling on my empty ring finger, his eyes darkening slightly, but soon returning to normal. "What about Lily?" "She's asleep." I pointed to the bed in the inner room. He nodded, not asking anything more, as if there had been no 4-year gap between us, as if I had just been away on a short trip and had only returned today. The atmosphere fell silent for a moment. I fiddled with the edge of my clothes, unsure of what to say. Stanley was the first to speak. "Are you hungry? Should I have the kitchen send up some food?" "No need, I'm not hungry." I shook my head. He didn't insist either, just quietly looked at me. That gaze, focused and affectionate, made my cheeks flush. Just then, the phone in his coat pocket vibrated, breaking the somewhat delicate silence. He took out his phone and glanced at it, his brows barely furrowing, then walked to the window to answer the call. His voice was very low, but I still caught bits and pieces. "Dr. Chen, yes, I understand. In this case, roughly when can there be improvement? Will it be that in the future, all lost?" I didn't catch the last words, but the suppression and anxiety in his tone stabbed at my heart like a needle. My heart suddenly sank. He hung up the phone and turned around, seeing my pale face. He paused for a moment. "Cecilia, what's wrong?" "Brother Stanley," my voice trembling, "what did you just say to the doctor? Something about losing some function?" Thinking of that vasectomy operation slip, a terrifying thought took shape in my mind. Stanley's expression also changed. He came over, placing both hands on my shoulders, trying to keep his tone calm. "It's nothing, just asking about some normal post-surgery recovery details. Don't overthink it." I've looked it up, tears uncontrollably streaming down my face. "Isn't that kind of surgery supposed to have little effect on that area?" He was silent for a moment, then sighed, reaching out to wipe away my tears with a touch as gentle as handling a fragile treasure. "There are exceptions to everything, Cecilia. Maybe I just have bad luck." He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. The doctor didn't have any definite conclusions, just said, "I should find a girlfriend, and then try again." Boom, my mind went completely blank. Find a girlfriend and try again? What does that mean? Could it be that because of that surgery, he really can't anymore? For me, for Lily, he paid such a price. What I owe him, I could never repay in this lifetime. "Don't overthink it, it's nothing serious." Seeing me so lost and distraught, Stanley smiled instead, but no matter how I looked at that smile, it carried a trace of bitterness and reluctance. He rubbed my hair. "We managed to get through each year even before we did this. How can this not be a big deal?" I almost shouted, tears flowing even more fiercely. For a man, if he loses that ability, what a huge blow and humiliation it must be. Stanley's gaze suddenly grew deep. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "Cecilia, if you're worried about whether your future will be happy, I will be very glad. If it's anything else, I really don't care." He gently touched my cheek. "You know, I've always been like this since I was young, somewhat cold-blooded, somewhat selfish. Except for matters concerning you, I don't really care about anything else. So, please, don't pity me." After he finished speaking, he picked up the coat draped over the sofa. "I'm going out for some fresh air. You behave and keep Lily company. I'll be back soon." The door closed softly, leaving me alone in the room. I collapsed onto the sofa, my whole heart tangled in a mess. If Stanley really was because of me. I bit my lip hard, the metallic taste of blood spreading in my mouth. A thought grew wildly in my mind, then I would marry him. I couldn't bear it, nor would I allow anyone to look down on him or despise him. In this life, I would stay by his side. I don't know how much time passed before Stanley returned. He looked a bit tired, with bloodshot eyes and an unusual flush on his face. "Brother Stanley, do you have a fever?" I reached out to feel his forehead, but he grabbed my wrist firmly. His palm was burning hot, and it startled me. "It's nothing." His voice was a bit slurred as he pulled me into the room, his steps unsteady. "Maybe caught a bit of a chill." He dragged me to the bedside, but he swayed and nearly fell. I quickly steadied him. "If you're really unwell, let's go to the hospital." He shook his head, fine beads of sweat forming on his forehead, his breathing heavy. "Cecilia." He suddenly lowered his head, his burning forehead pressed against mine. "I think I'm feeling a bit unwell." That heat was astonishingly intense. I panicked. "What's wrong? Is it a side effect from the surgery?" He looked at me with a dazed gaze, as if struggling to focus. "I don't know, it feels like there's a fire burning inside my body." He was breathing heavily, his forehead brushing against my cheek and the side of my neck, the wave of heat almost swallowing me whole. "Brother Stanley," my heart ached unbearably, and I was utterly panicked. In this state, he was clearly very uncomfortable. It had to be that surgery, it just had to be. "Cecilia." His dry, burning lips clumsily found mine and gently pressed against them. This kiss carried no desire, it was more like a dependence and a plea for comfort. My whole body stiffened. He seemed to notice my rigidity and tried to pull away, his voice tinged with hurt and self-mockery. "I'm sorry, In that moment, some switch inside me seemed to flip. All the guilt, heartache, pity, and those feelings suppressed for years exploded out at once. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, my gaze had become resolute. I raised my hand, hooked it around his neck, and met his lips. "Brother Stanley," my voice trembled slightly, yet carried an unwavering determination, "don't be afraid. I'll teach you, all right?" He was stunned, the deep red in his eyes reflecting my small figure, swirling with complex emotions, shock, confusion, and a faint, barely noticeable, desire. I didn't give him a chance to hesitate. I held him tightly, pressing my body gently but firmly, easily flipping him over and pinning his somewhat limp body onto the soft bed. A button on the cuff of his shirt had come undone, revealing a dark watch on his wrist. The room's soft lighting reflected off his sweat-dampened hairline, sparkling with tiny flickers of light. "Cecilia." He murmured my name, his voice hoarse and rough, the fire in his eyes burning brighter and brighter, almost ready to consume us both. I leaned down and whispered in his ear, using all the tenderness I knew and could think of to soothe him, to guide him. I could feel the tension in his body and his labored, suppressed breathing. When it finally happened, I bit my own arm to keep the scream from escaping. White flashes flickered before my eyes, my body felt as if it were floating on clouds, yet also sinking beneath the sea. I don't know how much time passed, but the heat radiating from him gradually subsided. He held me as if I were a precious treasure lost and now found again. The sound of water flowed in the bathroom as he helped me wash my body, every movement careful and gentle. Amidst the misty steam, he lifted me to sit on the wash basin, then slowly crouched down in front of me. "Cecilia." He looked up at me, his eyes clearer than before but carrying a trace of unease and guilt. I'm afraid I hurt you just now, and also afraid I can't make you feel good. So, let's just do it like this for now, okay?" I looked at his hair damp with steam and the cautious search in his eyes, feeling a mix of sadness and tenderness in my heart. I shook my head, reached out, and gently stroked his cheek. Near dawn, I lay on his shoulder, so exhausted I didn't even want to move a finger. What's really wrong with you?" I asked hoarsely, with a faint weakness as if surviving a disaster. Stanley tightened his grip on my arm, his voice carrying a faint trace of guilt. Maybe. I really do have a slight fever, plus I'm just too tired. I didn't buy his casual excuse for a second. But at this moment, digging into the reason no longer mattered. Brother Stanley. I whispered into his ear, using the last of my strength, my voice as light as a feather. Let's get our marriage certificate tomorrow, okay? His body stiffened, then he held me even tighter. In the darkness, I heard his heavily nasal reply, okay. At first light, we'll go. I went to see my grandfather in person. The old house was just as it had always been. The century-old ginkgo tree in the yard had half its leaves turned yellow, and when the wind blew, they rustled down, carpeting the ground in golden hues. The old man sat in the rattan chair, covered with a thin blanket, looking quite spirited. Girl, have you made up your mind? He lifted his teacup and took a sip, the steam blurring the lines at the corner of his eyes. I nodded, trying to keep my voice calm. Yes, I've thought it through. Over the years, I've caused you trouble. Nonsense about trouble, the old man waved his hand, his cane tapping lightly on the ground. It's our family, it's that Francis kid who owes you and Lily an apology. Repaying kindness, in the end, our benefactor's granddaughter ends up wronged. What kind of thing is that? His eyes were a little red. I knew he truly cared for me. What you've given me has already far exceeded the kindness my grandfather showed back then. My nose tingled with emotion. From now on, I probably won't be able to visit you often. Please take good care of yourself. If you have time, bring Lily back to see this old man. He sighed, the child is innocent, after all, she carries our family's bloodline. If you ever face difficulties, don't try to tough it out alone. I've noted it, Grandpa. Go ahead. The old man waved his hand, as if he had just lifted a heavy burden. The car drove out of the old house's ornate iron gate. The sunlight was just right, shining warmly through the window onto the face. At that moment, a familiar black Bentley suddenly braked hard in the adjacent lane. It was Francis. He got out of the car and stood there at a distance, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his forearms, the top two buttons of his collar undone, his hair slightly messy. I didn't ask the driver to stop. Our car just brushed past him like that. In the rearview mirror, his figure grew smaller and smaller, standing there all alone, like a soulless statue. Even the agreement between him and me was void. Separating was simpler than I imagined, not even needing another word. Stanley wasn't waiting for me downstairs at the hotel. I went straight upstairs and opened the door to our suite. Lily was sitting on the carpet, building blocks with Stanley, giggling. Mom. Lily waddled over with her little legs. Stanley also stood up, took the bag from my hand, and casually ruffled my hair, his eyes curved into a smile. Everything went smoothly? I looked at him, and the stone that had been weighing on my heart finally dropped. He pulled out 2 red booklets from his pocket and waved them in front of me like a child who had just gotten candy. Miss Cecilia, I look forward to your guidance from now on. Marriage certificates. I burst out laughing, took one, and flipped it open. In the photo, the two of us were very close, smiling a little foolishly. Stanley picked up his phone, took a snap of the marriage certificate, and quickly started editing something. Before long, my phone began vibrating wildly. On social media, Stanley posted a status, married, have a daughter, do not disturb. Wife Cecilia, daughter Lily. The picture was the marriage certificate. The comments below exploded instantly. I looked at him, and he pinched my cheek again. What? Afraid I'll change my mind? Not afraid at all, I said, but my heart was bubbling with sweetness. At that moment, Bridget, the younger sister, was holding her phone and rushed into Francis's study in a hurry. Francis had just returned from the old house, his face so pale it looked like it could drip water, irritably tugging at his tie. Brother! Brother, look! Isn't this a computer-generated photo? Bridget pressed the phone in front of him, her fingers trembling slightly with excitement. Stanley, how could he possibly marry Cecilia? Cecilia, she. Francis's gaze fell on the screen, on that glaring red marriage certificate, and Stanley's words, married, has a daughter, like an ice-cold dagger, piercing deeply into his heart. He snatched the phone from Bridget, his fingers scrolling through to see a photo of Stanley holding Cecilia and Lily. Lily was smiling broadly, showing all her teeth, while Cecilia leaned on Stanley's shoulder, her expression one of relaxation and peace that he had never seen before. Bro, this has to be fake, right? Bridget kept muttering stubbornly beside him. A few days ago, on the very days you and Sister Freya were spotted, I even ran into Cecilia at the mall. She was clearly still picking out things for you. How could she suddenly be married to someone else in the blink of an eye? Francis suddenly lifted his head, his gaze sharp enough to cut. Which day are you talking about? What did she buy? Bridget was startled by him and stammered, It was that brand you often go to. I saw her looking at cufflinks and asked the sales assistant a few questions. Later, I don't know what happened, but she said she didn't want them anymore. It seemed like the card was swiped wrong or something, but in the end, she didn't buy anything. Cufflinks. A buzzing sound echoed in Francis's mind. He remembered that day he did receive a bank notification for a considerable purchase, but soon after, there was a message confirming a successful refund. He even went out of his way to call Cecilia, and she just casually said, I swiped the wrong card and paid again. At that time, he thought she was just throwing a tantrum, but he never expected otherwise. He stared intently at the photo of Stanley. In the picture, Stanley was wearing a light blue shirt, and at the cuff, a delicate six-pointed star cufflink shimmered subtly under the light. It was a brand he was familiar with, but not the style he usually used. It was something Cecilia would like, and something he once thought she would buy for him. It turned out she hadn't just not bought it, she hadn't bought it for him. That returned gift was immediately given to another man. Francis felt a surge of anger rush to his head, and the phone in his hand creaked under his grip. Brother, say something. Bridget cautiously tugged at his sleeve. Francis pushed her away roughly, his chest heaving violently. He recalled the day Cecilia left with Lily, and the servant's hesitant, unspoken looks. He remembered, after he publicly clarified that he was single, the whispers around the house, the gentleman really is something, how sad the lady must feel hearing this. Exactly, I've never seen anyone with a better temper than the lady. He recalled Cecilia holding Lily, calmly telling him, Francis, let's separate. In her eyes, there was no resentment, only a dead silence. Only later did he realize that giving up is such a quiet thing. Give me the phone. Francis's voice was hoarse and harsh. He scrolled to Stanley's post on Moments, where Stanley himself had replied to a mutual friend's teasing comment, no choice, I was a bit late to make a move, almost let her be held back by someone else. But luckily, I'm young and strong, unlike some people, 3 years older than me, all show and no substance. All show and no substance. Francis repeated these words over and over, his temples throbbing as if a nerve was about to snap. He threw his phone onto the table, the screen hitting the hard corner and going dark. Bridget was so frightened she dared not breathe, tiptoeing out quietly. Francis felt stifled inside the room, grabbed a pack of cigarettes, and staggered out to the backyard. The flowers in the garden were Cecilia's favorite to tend to, but now neglected, they showed signs of withering. A few late-blooming roses had begun to droop, looking dejected. The cigarette burned down, the ember scorched his fingertip, and he shuddered suddenly, dropping the bud at his feet. The warmth that was once within reach, the people he thought would never leave him, now, were all gone. The wind blew, stirring up a few dead leaves, spinning them as they drifted away, never to be found again. And he, Francis, stood in this empty garden, tasting for the first time what it means to be truly deserved. Days passed like the rings of the old locust tree outside the window, one circle after another, steadily and unhurriedly adding up. In a blink, it was the 5th year since Stanley and I got married, and Lily had already become a little girl who could braid her own hair and secretly hide snacks, saying she wanted to save them for Daddy Stanley. That afternoon, the sunlight was especially warm, making people feel lazy. Lily lay on the carpet drawing. Stanley leaned against the sofa reading a financial magazine, occasionally glancing at the two of us, a slight smile always playing at the corners of his mouth. I poured him another cup of tea, the teacup lightly tapping against the glass coffee table, producing a crisp sound. "Stanley," I said, holding the colorful crayon tip I had just picked up from Lily's drawing paper, and sat down beside him, "shouldn't we get Lily a playmate?" His fingers paused as he flipped through the pages, his gaze lifting from the magazine to rest on my face, carrying a hint of curiosity and an indescribable softness. Why did this suddenly come to mind? He put down the magazine, his body slightly turned toward me. "Have you forgotten what I promised you back then? Lily is my only child." I knew what he meant. At that time, to make a promise to me and Lily, he even underwent that surgery. Just thinking about it still stirs a pang of bitterness in my heart. "I haven't forgotten." I shook my head, speaking softly, "But Stanley, sometimes when Lily looks at the neighbors' kids playing with their little brothers and sisters, in her eyes." I didn't continue, just sighed quietly. Lily's ears perked up when she heard us talking. She lifted her little head, blinking her big eyes. "Mommy, Daddy Stanley, are you talking about having a little brother or sister for me?" She put down her paintbrush, scampered over, and clung to Stanley's knee. "I want one. I want a little sister, I can share half of my dolls with her." Stanley was amused by his daughter and reached out to rub her little head, but his eyes looked at me, filled with hesitation and tenderness. He's a man who values his promises. Once he says something, he wishes it were etched into his very bones. "Look," I took advantage of the moment and gently nudged his arm, "Lily wants one too." And, I paused, looking into his eyes, speaking earnestly, "Stanley, I want to have another child with you. I want our family to feel a little more complete, even though it already is." He was silent for a moment, his long fingers absent-mindedly stroking the armrest of the sofa. Sunlight filtered through the window panes, casting soft shadows on his sharply defined profile. "I'm afraid you'll suffer," he finally spoke, his voice a little low. "I'm not afraid." I held his hand, his palm as warm as ever. "With you here, I'm not afraid of anything." Later, Stanley still nodded. He went to the hospital again and had a recanalization surgery. The doctor said the recovery was good, but the process, his face looked quite pale for a few days after he came back. I was so worried, but he comforted me instead, saying it was nothing, just a minor ordeal. A year later, our second daughter was born. We named her Leah, hoping she would be surrounded by warmth throughout her life. Leah looks very much like Stanley, especially those eyes, clear as mountain spring water. Stanley dotes on Leah, that's for sure. But when it comes to Lily, he always seems to be a little more biased. For example, when buying toys, if he buys one for Leah, he will definitely get one for Lily as well, often the very one Lily has been asking for repeatedly. Sometimes I tease him about it, and he just smiles, pinches my cheek, and says, "Lily is the older sister, it's only right." Stanley's mother. She held the delicate little Leah in her arms, beaming with joy. In earlier years, because of Stanley's issues, she often sighed and lamented, holding my hand and wiping her tears, apologizing to me. Now it's settled, she keeps saying every day, "Cecilia, look how adorable Leah is. How about, we try a little harder?" I was both amused and exasperated. Stanley promptly escorted the old lady out, closed the door, and said to me, "Don't listen to her. Having Lily and Leah is enough for us. One more, and I'm afraid you'll be worn out." He paused, then added, "Besides, I'm afraid my energy is only enough to love the three of you properly." He said this very seriously, but I sensed there was another meaning behind his words. Late at night, when the children were all sound asleep, Stanley came out after his shower, his hair still damp. Habitually, he walked to the bedside, leaned over, and kissed my forehead. "What are you thinking about?" He pulled back the covers and got in, naturally wrapping his arm around my waist. I was thinking, I nuzzled into his chest, finding a comfortable position, did someone really take some kind of miraculous elixir back then? His body stiffened for a moment, then he chuckled softly, his chest trembling slightly. bringing this up again? He pinched my nose. Haven't you experienced it yourself? That's not certain, I teased him deliberately. What if it was just a coincidence? He rolled over, pinning me beneath him, his eyes looking especially deep in the dim bedside lamplight, like a night sky filled with stars. He lowered his head, his nose brushing against mine, his breath warm. So, want to try again? His voice carried a husky smile. This time, I promise it won't be a coincidence. I smiled as I pushed him, but he caught my wrist, our fingers interlacing. Honestly, Cecilia, he gazed into my eyes, his expression suddenly becoming incredibly serious. Sometimes I wonder, if back then, if I hadn't let go, would it have spared you a lot of pain? The wind outside rustled through the leaves. I knew what he was referring to, the years I was entangled with Francis, those days that were unacknowledged and disrespected. I shook my head, raised my hand to his cheek, and gently stroked the faint stubble on his chin with my fingertip. Stanley, it's all in the past. There are no ifs. I leaned closer and pressed a soft kiss on his lips. Besides, if I hadn't gone through all that, I might not be who I am now, knowing exactly what I truly want, and being so certain about it. Determine what? He asked, a gleam of anticipation in his eyes. Determine, I looked at him, word by word, clear and firm. I love you, Stanley. I love you very, very much. His eyes seemed to redden for a moment, and the strength with which he held me tightened, as if he wanted to meld me into his very bones and blood. After a long while, he answered in my ear, with the same solemn and heartfelt voice. Cecilia, his voice carried a barely perceptible tremor, I love you too. From long, long ago, to long, long after. Outside the window, moonlight flowed like water, gently filling the entire room. I knew this was the happiness I wanted, simple, real, yet unbreakable. The pains and resentments of the past have long since vanished without a trace, dissolved in the warmth and love of day after day. Living in the moment and cherishing those around you is more important than anything else.